Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Post-Grad with Asha. My name is Asha Creary, and I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Texas and a licensed professional counselor approved supervisor in the state of Missouri. Let's get into the discussion of what to ask a supervisor before agreeing to a supervisor contract. So the first question is going to be, what are your rates? This is so important, especially if you have a budget and if you have a certain amount of money saved up for supervision. You want to make sure that whatever you have saved up will get you through the at least 18 months of supervision at minimum. Now, supervision could take longer than 18 months, but you want to make sure you have some type of funding set aside. Or if you don't, can you afford a car payment? Like, can you really afford a $400, $500 car payment, or can you afford a $200 car payment? That's going to be very, very key to you. The next thing is going to be, do you have additional fees? Once you figure out what their rates are, you might want to know what are some additional fees. So some additional fees you may see in supervisory contracts would be court appearance fees. So what this means is if you're in a situation where you acted unethically, right? And it is your fault that your supervisor has to go to court to where they have to defend you or to where they have to provide evidence on the things that they taught you or trained you on beforehand, before the incident occurred, they're going to charge you for that. And mostly because if they have to attend a board hearing on your behalf or with you, they have to clear their schedule. They have to show up to this board meeting, whether it's, and board meetings now I think are all virtual for that matter, but either way, they have to clear their schedule. You don't get a set time in which you show up. It's you have to be at this board meeting, and this board meeting could take 3, 4, 5 hours, and your license is at risk. And not only is your license as an associate at risk, your supervisor's license is now at risk because of something that you did. And if that is the case, they may charge you again for having to actually show up on your behalf. The next thing is going to be, you may have to pay emergency supervisory fees or supervision fees. So what that means is, let's say you have an emergency and you work at an agency over the weekend and something happens. Well, you call your supervisor. Your supervisor may be in Jamaica living a best life, and you called them for an emergency session because it couldn't wait, or you reached out to them for an emergency session because it couldn't wait until Monday. Well, that supervisor is more likely going to bill you for their time, not because they don't want to support you in whatever it is you got going on, but because they didn't set aside that time for you to be calling them on Saturday or Sunday for an emergency situation that occurred over the weekend. Now, not every time when you reach out for an emergency session will your supervisor charge you. There are going to be situations where it's like a 5-minute phone call and you're panicking for nothing, and your supervisor's like, it's okay, you're fine, let's process, cool, have a good day, I'll see you at supervision. But there's other situations that literally require more time, an entire hour, an hour and 50 minutes, 2 hours, sometimes 3, sometimes it's a 30-minute conversation. But then the supervisor now has to stop whatever it is they're doing to create and upload and provide you with the documentation or the evidence to whatever the incident is to help you get through that. So there are some situations where you may get charged for emergency sessions, but you want to know that up front, because if you get charged for an emergency situation, you're going to be like, well, what is this? Well, in the contract, it states that individual supervision is this fee, and that counts as an emergency situation. And it may cost you more just because it's on a weekend, or it's on a Sunday, or it's when they're at church, or when they're with family, or whatever the situation is. The other question in regard to additional fees, you're going to want to know, are there fees for being placed on a growth plan? You might be thinking there shouldn't be. There should be, or there could be. It depends on your supervisor, right? Like if, again, you're on a growth plan because you are causing harm to clients, or because your personal life is starting to impact your ability to provide a therapeutic space, or because your charts are not being done on a timely manner. Remember, your supervisor has agreed to uphold the ethical standards, and they have agreed to manage you in upholding those very same ethical standards. So if they put you on a growth plan, that means they're more likely going to meet with you more frequently. And if they do dyadic or triadic supervision, they're more likely going to ask you to do individual supervision in addition to the group or the weekly. Or they may just tell you, hey, we're going to do individual, but the individual rate is usually more expensive than the group rate. Not only that, they may be required to meet with you more frequently. They may have to come out to your site. They may have to find a training that they want you to take. They have to put together this remediation or growth plan, and then they have to follow up on it. And then from there, that's more paperwork for them. So you just want to be mindful that should you make a mistake, what is it going to cost me? And then the last question in regard to additional fees would be, do you require deposits? So some supervisors require deposit. I think it's fair. A deposit when they sign your paperwork, this one will help set you up. So what that means is if my monthly rate is $300 or $200 or whatever it is, and I say, hey, for your first month, and when I sign your paperwork, I require for you to give me the $200 or the $300 up front. That $200 or the $300 is going to count towards your first month. One, this is to show that you're serious, but two, it is to make sure that the second your application gets approved, that you're already good to go. Like you've already paid your supervisor. And then from there, your monthly rate will be as such. So they may say, here's the deposit for the first month. After this first month, your first recurring monthly payment is going to be on the 15th of every month. So that means if your license comes in on the 1st, you've already paid your deposit. So now you pay for the 15th of that upcoming month, right? And you're good to go. And again, this is to keep you from having to scrape up $400 to give them for your initial meeting with them once you have been approved by the state. Okay. The next question is, do you offer dual supervision or consultation, such as, am I an LPC and an LMFT? Am I an LPC and an RPT, which is a registered play therapist, supervisor? Am I an LPC and an EMDR consultant? Am I a LPC and LCSW? Like, what additional supervision do you offer? The reason that that's key is because if their rates are at $600, $700 a month, again, or whatever they have it set at, what are you paying for? Are you paying for LPC and RPT hours at the same time because your supervisor is an RPTS and an LPCS, and they're providing you with tips and tools for both tracks of counseling? Or are they an LPC and they're an EMDR consultant and they're supporting you with both parts of your track? Now, of course, your LPC is always priority, but if they offer additional options for you, that's going to be very key in your growth as a clinician, especially as you consider who am I going to be and what type of clients am I going to work with in the future. The next thing is, what is included in supervision? Do you audit my charts? Well, you'll probably only see that if you're in a private practice or if you operate your own practice. They may audit your charts. Do you do site visits? Do you do annual or monthly or quarterly feedback? Do you provide me with additional opportunities for growth, such as speaking engagements, such as my ability to present CEs? What are you offering? What comes with my supervision outside of weekly meetings? Do you support me in finding a new job? Are you supporting what are you helping me with? I'm paying you this money, and I have every right to ask all of these questions. So I'm going to ask every single question that I can up front. The next thing is, what days and times do you currently have set for supervision? This is important because if it doesn't align with your day, then it may not be a great fit. You don't want to sign up for supervision and you know you can't attend supervision. And that's going to be an issue because if you're not attending supervision, your supervisor cannot sign off on your paperwork because they haven't met with you. So again, even if you miss supervision, you wouldn't want to miss supervision because you will have already had the times and dates. Emergencies happen, but in those situations, you're probably going to have to do an individual session with that supervisor within the same week or however that supervisor has their supervision makeup policy set. Can I speak to your current supervisees before choosing to move forward regarding their experience? This is important. If you have a supervisor that already has supervisees under them, if you can, interview one or two of them. Ask like, hey, what's your experience been like? What are areas of growth for the supervisor? What do you really like that the supervisor does? What do you wish that you can get more of? Ask them questions. Those are important. The next thing is going to be, what is your therapeutic approach and style? This is key, because if I'm working with kids and my therapeutic style is play therapy and I intend to find a supervisor and they're a sex therapist and they only work with adults 35 and up, that's probably not going to be a good fit. The next thing is, what is your preferred population? Again, if I work with kids and you only work with 18 plus, it may not be a good fit. Now, if they are a practitioner who was a school counselor or who did work with kids, but they've just changed their schedule to where it's not conducive to working with kids, then that's different, right? Like if they only work with 18 and up just because of schedule wise, but they do work with kids and they do have the experience and they do have the certifications and trainings, it may not be that big of an issue. The next thing is, what type of mentorship do you offer outside of supervision? For example, do you mentor us in finding speaking engagements, developing ourselves as a clinician, mentoring us in launching private practices, mentoring us in developing our niche? What are you mentoring us in addition to just traditional counselor supervision? The next thing is, in what other ways have you used your license? Have you used it to train other clinicians? Have you written a book, creating journals that you sell? Do you have YouTube channels? Do you advocate for other clinicians? Do you do immigration assessments? Are you sitting on any other boards within the city or, counseling boards? What are you actually doing with your license? And this is key, especially like if I'm a clinician and I want to get into writing books, self-help books, then me having a supervisor that does self-help writing or technical writing, that's key. That's what I want, right? I'm going to want that. The next thing is, do you offer opportunities to see clients within your practice? If so, what is the impact on the supervision rate? So there are supervisors that say you're going to still pay me my $400, but you can see clients in my practice. There's some supervisors that say we offer 50% discount on supervision if you see a certain amount of clients each week, but if that number drops below, your rate goes up to this. And then there's some situations where supervisors say we offer you free supervision as long as you see clients here at our office. So that's going to be important, because if they do have a rate, but you have the opportunity to work for them part-time in order for you not to have to pay supervision, that's key. That's important. The next thing is, how do you handle conflict with supervisees? That's important, because if you have a passive aggressive supervisor that's just like, I'm gonna just drop you, I don't have time to deal with this, that's going to be an issue, because you're not growing as a clinician, especially if it's something that you should be working on, but maybe you and the supervisor are not seeing eye to eye on. That means that your supervisors should be doing the things that they need to do to help get you guys on the same page. And then if that's not the case, they can bring in mediators or third-party supervisors who can kind of help co-facilitate moving past the conflict. But if they don't handle conflict well, if they're saying, no, everything's going great, I never have issues with my supervisees, that's a concern, because every supervisor has had some sort of conflict with their supervisee. It may not be a big conflict, but it could be something so small as again, the associates are not putting their charts in a timely manner. The next thing is, should a growth plan become necessary during supervision? What is the process? You want to know that. Do you just send me a growth plan to sign and I'm supposed to follow up with it? Do you meet with me and then tell me why this growth plan is put in place? Am I required to do additional supervision? Does that mean I can't see clients if I'm on a growth plan while under supervision? What does that actually mean to you, to me, in this process? Again, you don't have the idea that you're going to be put on a growth plan. That's not what that question is for. That is in case something should happen, meaning maybe you're not knowledgeable of something, or an incident occurred, or you got some stuff going on that's impacted your judgment. Sometimes things can happen where you didn't even see a growth plan coming, but either way, you want to make sure that you're aware of it. The next question is, how often do you incorporate ethics into supervision? This is important because most clinicians aren't really aware or understanding of what the ethics actually mean when you put it into practice. And so if you have a supervisor that's well versed on ethics during supervision, that probably should be coming up every week in supervision. If not, do they set aside at least one supervisory meeting each month to go over ethics? Do they require you to do a certain training? How is that incorporated in the supervisory relationship? The next thing is, how many individual or group supervision sessions do you offer per month? As mentioned before, there's some supervisors that do every other week is group and every other week is individual. And there's some that does group only. And then if you do have to do an individual, then it's more so an emergency situation. The next question is going to be, what are your goals in the next 5 years as a supervisor? So if you find you're a supervisor, again, you're going to be under them for at least 1.5 years at minimum in the state of Texas. So if you're working with a supervisor and they're like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm going to do. I'll probably close my practice. I'm not going to see clients. I'm only going to do supervision. I'm whatever. If that doesn't sit well with you, then you really have to ask yourself, is this going to be the best supervisor for me if they're shutting down their practice next year? Like, what am I hoping to get out of this long term? And if in 5 years, they have no intention on being in therapy or working with clients, is that going to impact my supervision experience? Are they going to just be signing paperwork? Are they going to just be doing meetings and not supporting me? Like, how is their 5-year plan going to impact my 18-month plan? The next thing is, what do you enjoy the most about being a supervisor? I think that's a really good question to ask. We don't really get into what that looks like and what that means to be a supervisor. We know that there are supervisors and they do paperwork and they help you and they sign your paperwork, but what do they actually enjoy about being a supervisor? What do they enjoy the least about being a supervisor? That's going to be key, because if they say something that defines you as a person to a T, or how you operate to a T, might not be a good fit for a supervisor. The next thing is, what has been your biggest barrier as a supervisor so far? This is important because this is usually where supervisors start to bring up their horror stories that they've had with associates. This also brings up probably their beliefs about like how the licensing board has been operating. And then it also could just be what has caused them to feel like they're trekking uphill, right? And then lastly, how do you choose supervisees? At what point do you decide you want to move forward with a supervisee? What does that look like? What qualities, what characteristics, all the things in between. So with all that being said, I'm sure that there's 1,000 more questions you can add to this list, but these are some questions to help get you started. So please take the time to maybe jot some of these down, and I'll probably put them in the description box just so that you have them. But take some time to really sit with these questions and use these as you interview supervisors before agreeing to a supervisory relationship. Another question you probably should ask before we get off is, once I pass my test, will you sign my paperwork the same day? Should I schedule a meeting with you the same day? And how do you want your deposit made if you require one? Do you want it through check, cash? What you need? And again, that's going to help you jumpstart and plan and prepare for the moment you pass your exam. So again, my name is Asha Creary. I am a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Texas and a licensed professional counselor approved supervisor in the state of Missouri. I hope these questions helped you a lot. I am at the office sitting on the couch. So please excuse some of the background and different things, but I hope you were able to get whatever it is you need out of this video, and wishing you the best of luck in finding a supervisor here in the state of Texas. Bye.